he's shown that he is an excellent father. He make daddyhood look fine as hell. Child, I couldn't wait for them damn 6 weeks to be up. Now, he definitely ended up with some milk in his eye a time or two, but we wasn't fighting. This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition. Short Stories, Synchronicity, Part 4. When we left off in Part 3, the men had wrapped up their evening in Puerto Rico, and the women had called it a night in Dallas, Texas. Regina and Angela were in the middle of a conversation. Angela was putting all of the things between her and Regina on the floor, and Regina was doing the best that she could to absorb it all. She told Regina about the day when LJ pushed up on her, how she'd shut him down and why, what she learned about herself and her life as a result, and then she said, I get that you feel like I handle difficulties with grace. The truth of the matter is, when bad things happen, I feel like my world is being turned upside down. The difference between me and other people is I just don't let it. I allow myself to feel what I'm feeling, but I evaluate and assess those feelings. I compare them to the truth as I know it and what I know about what God says about me, the plans that I know He has for my life. I always try to focus on Him and not on the problem. I focus on His ability to make a way and not my own. And that's not always easy to do. Sometimes it's a battle in and of itself to just trust that the God that I serve, the one who loves me better than anyone else ever could, is going to ensure that even if things aren't all right, they will be okay. And even if they don't turn out the way that I would prefer, they will still work together for my good and His glory. And sometimes that's all I have. Like now. Michael is in the wind. Me and Q are beefing. Regina said, beefing? Angela said, yes. Because he knows a whole lot more about what Michael's been involved in and where he is than he's willing to say. And he expects for me to just trust him and the families and accept being in the dark. And that isn't something I'm comfortable with where my children are concerned. I fare better with somebody keeping a secret that involves me than somebody keeping a secret that involves them. I'm responsible for them. God has entrusted me with them. If something happens to them, I gotta answer to God for how I protected them or failed to protect them. And I don't feel like I can go to God and say, well, you know those children that you let me borrow? I lost one of them. Now, I'm not comparing the boy to Jesus, but I can only imagine how Joseph felt when he'd taken Mary and the children to Jerusalem. They'd taken Jesus to the temple. And when they'd headed back home, after traveling nearly 3 days, they realized that He was missing. They'd asked everybody if they'd seen Jesus. Traveled back 3 more days, looking for Him everywhere, only to find Him in the same temple that they'd visited. Can you imagine? Joseph had to be kicking himself. Here he was being trusted with the Son of God, raising Him as His own son, only to lose the boy who would grow up to become the man who would give his life for all of our sins. He had to have been thinking that he had screwed up the whole plot, and his son was only missing for 3 days. Michael's been missing since a week before Q showed up in your hotel room with those divorce papers. And that's about when I realized that something was rotten in Denmark. There was no way in the world that Q didn't know more than he was saying, if he was willing to abandon the search for Michael to take you those damn papers. Speaking of which, I was out of my damn mind. I had no idea where my child was. And you was calling and texting, playing on my damn phone, talking about some mess that happened damn near 20 years ago. That's why I blocked you. I've been mad at you plenty of times. But when something was going on in your life, I dropped everything to be there for you, Regina. My son was missing, and you knew that. And you stayed your behind in Maryland. And the only reason why you came back to Texas was so that you could confront me and LJ and file those papers. When LJ asked me to let you stay here, my flesh wanted to say hell no. But my spirit knew that it was the righteous thing to do. I knew that if nothing else, your children needed their mother. Keeping you safe was more important than my hurt feelings. But when you actually tried to have a conversation with me about that BS, that was a bridge too damn far. That's why I walked out of the main house and didn't have the conversation with you. Because I knew full well that I was going to end up putting paws on you. And if you think Rennie wanted a piece of you, you ain't got a clue. Because that's the fight you probably could have won. Had you and I gone head to head, you was going to lose. Because I was done. Regina said, I'm sorry. Angela said, I know you are, and you should be. But you want to know how I feel, I'm telling you. 2 months later, I'm hosting Isla and V's 3rd birthday party. Your niece and nephew, your godchildren. Your children are there. LJ is there. Your mother is there. but you aren't. Because once again, you've chosen you. You're too embarrassed to show your face. You worried about what other people gonna think because you and LJ are divorced. You worried about how many people know that Noah Kirk is your biological father. Regina said, DNA contributor, not father. Angela said, whatever. You was in your head, in your feelings. Once again, you weren't there for me. Mind you, we were holding these festivities in Michael's absence because I still didn't know where my son was. You said that you've been a horrible friend. I hate to have to agree with you. Regina asked, then how can you say that you forgive me when I've done so many things to offend you? Angela said, because when you know who people are, you expect them to be just who they are. That doesn't mean that the things that they do don't hurt. It means you know how to put the things they do and that hurt in perspective. It also means that now we are at a crossroads. When this conversation started, I told you that I was going to tell you the truth. And that when this women's weekend ended, you were going to have to get help. See, as long as you didn't know just how I was impacted by your selfishness, I couldn't require you to do anything different. My expectations were pretty low. Because being in a relationship with you has taught me that I can't expect me from you. But now that you know all about how I feel, you have an obligation. I now can hold you to an expectation, and I plan to. You've lost your husband. You haven't lost me as a friend, but you can, and you will. If you don't get it together, I ain't never lost a single person that I needed. My heart was broken, and I thought my world was ending when my mother died. I spent most of my life crushed after my father died, and God had to show me that I could live without them, and I could live well. Hear me when I say that I can live without you too. I don't want to, but I can. So this is your ultimatum, Gigi. Do the work to heal the hurt so that you can stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. Or find you some new friends. Meanwhile, in Stephanie, Tru, Rennie, and Selima's suite of rooms, Selima had just finished catching the girls up on what she'd been doing over the past 6 months. Once her newborn daughter, Alana, got out of the NICU, she was all in. She'd finally accepted the fact that the Queen Mother had sat her down and her husband wasn't playing no games. Selima said that whole breastfeeding thing started out real crazy. But Wise was adamant that I was going to do it. And the Queen Mother had said that it wasn't going to hurt nothing to at least try. The pumping I could do. When she was in the NICU, I realized that she needed all that liquid gold. But she picked up that weight fast. And when she got home, she was ravenous. Before she was released from the hospital, the lactation consultant came and helped me nurse her from the breast. And I was pretty sure she was going to be a bottle-fed baby, because that was not it. Child went from feeling like a cow on a farm being milked when I used the breast pump to feeling like a dog who just given birth to a litter of puppies. And the other 3 women guffawed. Rennie didn't have children, so she didn't have a point of reference. And neither Tru nor Stephanie had ever nursed. Selima said, but then Angela came over with her super experienced self and showed me the ropes. And I changed my mind, because it was a whole lot easier to just pop a titty out and plop it in her mouth than to get all them pump parts and be pouring milk from the pump to the bottle, from the bottle to the bag. And I still pump after I feed her and when we're not together. And apparently I'm what they call an overproducer. So we have like a 6-month supply of breast milk in the freezer, which means everybody is comfortable with me going to work. I got a little plan on how I'm going to stop pumping so this milk could dry up. Because the last thing I need to be doing is threatening a nigga's life and having my titties leaking every damn where. Stephanie was in stitches. She was like, Selima, you gotta stop. You gotta stop. Rennie said, maybe you could use breast milk as a weapon. Just squirt a nigga in the eye. Tru said, that is disgusting. Selima said, I think my man would have a problem with me pulling my titties out in the field. And all of the women laughed even harder. Tru asked, so why is this cool with you going back to work? This work? Selima said, yeah, he's been pretty true to his word. When Alana was born, one of the things that we agreed was that if I was staying home, so was he. And if I was no longer going to be working from home, neither was he. So my whole maternity leave, we've been right at home together. And he's shown that he is an excellent father. He make daddyhood look fine as hell. Child, I couldn't wait for them damn 6 weeks to be up. Now, he definitely ended up with some milk in his eye a time or two, but we wasn't fighting. Stephanie said, oh my God, what did he do? Selima said, girl, he opened his mouth and said, ah. Rennie said, you nasty as hell. I thought I was bad. Selima said, whatever. You better be glad my man is in Puerto Rico, because otherwise I wouldn't be here with y'all heifers right now. We gets it in on a regular. Stephanie said, oh Lord, you gonna be sat down again? Selima said, I'm on birth control. We were using natural remedies right up until my last menstrual cycle. And then I got that implant and we've been using condoms. I wanted to wait until I was closer to going back into the field before I got on birth control, because that can impact your milk supply. And I wanted my daughter to have as much of my milk as she could get. She's got enough to last her to her first birthday without having to supplement with formula. Stephanie said, I love that for you. I knew you would make a great mom. I'm glad you handled this better than I did, because I was worried that we both inherited the Lopez crazy and you was going to ratchet it up a notch and end up losing your damn husband. Selima was like, oh no, I wasn't letting that happen. I learned from your mistakes and from my mother's. The truth be told, I was blessed to have Aunt Bella, my pops, my stepmother, my mother-in-law, and my husband. Oh, and I can't forget Mom Brenda. She was praying. The Queen Mother was fussing and cussing. My father was cautioning. Mrs. Ali was silently supporting. And Wise was all on my behind. Eventually, my father convinced him to back up a little bit. We had a heart-to-heart, and I realized that they all just had my and Alana's best interests at heart. My daughter needs me, and this business is dangerous and messy, but I can have both. I got a strong team behind me, a great support system, and a man who pulling up. If anything don't look right, I could do this. Stephanie said, we all can. Meanwhile, in the suite of rooms that Simone, Star, Chantal, Natalia, and Courtney were sharing, the 5 women were having a difficult discussion. Courtney had just explained to the triplets that while they wouldn't be at the round table, they'd be impacted by the things that would be revealed there. And so would Natalia. Courtney said, there's a lot that I just can't say, but the Queen Mother and Catherine asked me to try and prepare you all. There are developments with both of your brothers, and none of it is going to be easy for you all to hear or handle. They're both going to need your support. They're going to need your prayers, your encouragement, and they're going to need to know that they still have the very people who they came into this world with. They are a part of this life. You all aren't. Courtney and Star made eye contact because Courtney knew that Star was. But the 5 of you have done life together since the day you all were born. You came into this world from the same mother and father. You all have a bond that you can't possibly have with anybody else. Just like me and my sister have a bond that we can't have with anybody else. I'm going to be here to support my sister, and you 3 are going to need to be here to support your brothers. They're not going to be out on an island by themselves. But ain't nothing in the world like having your siblings, your sisters. You may very well learn some things that are going to be very hard to hear and even harder to believe. But you're going to have to stand in the gap for them. They're relying on you. Simone said, I'm calling Sincere. I need to know what's going on. In unison, Courtney and Natalia said, don't do that. Courtney said, this is a very delicate situation. And if you call your brother, if any of you tell Sincere anything, if you say anything that even gives him the impression that he's walking into a meeting that's going to be difficult for him, he's going to run for the border. That's going to make everything worse, and he's going to leave everything in Saint's lap. Saint is in a federal prison. Don't you all want him to come home? Star said, of course we do. But we also want to know what the hell is going on. Courtney said, then you all have to be patient. Let the round table happen. Let everything come out. I promise. You'll know everything when it's over. But please don't tip Sincere off. He's not even available right now. He's working. Chantal said, he's not in Puerto Rico with the other guys? Courtney said, I didn't say that. Star just looked at Courtney because she knew from her response that he was not in Puerto Rico with the other guys. Catherine had to have Sincere out on a dummy mission, keeping him busy until the round table, keeping him out of the way and keeping him from overhearing anything that might tip him off. And Star didn't know what the hell was going on, but she knew it had to be bad. If Catherine had put Courtney in a position to have this conversation with her sisters, she was risking Simone or Chantal asking her questions about her involvement in the 5 families. And almost like Courtney had read her mind, Courtney said, the only reason why I'm having this conversation with you all is because I've known your stepmother for a very long time. She's been like an aunt to me. I know how she thinks, how she moves. I know her heart. She had an opportunity to take out a woman who'd been having an affair with your father. And instead of allowing the men who she sent to do that, to do her dirty work, when that woman asked to sit down and meet with her, she agreed. She came out of that meeting with an alliance with that woman. And they both came out of it with a mutual respect for one another that nobody thought was possible. I need you all to remember that. When you find out what all's been going on, keep that at the forefront of your mind. Catherine may be rough around the edges, but she always has this family's best interest at heart, and she has a huge heart. She loves all 5 of you, and she may have an interesting way of showing it, but I've seen her heart, and I've never seen her make the choices that she's had to make with nearly as much deliberation or conflict as she has over the last few months. Then Courtney looked at Natalia, and Natalia knew that little Easter speech was as much for the triplets as it was for her. She was already nervous about the round table because she'd been summoned, but that just made her even more nervous, especially considering that neither Saint nor her sister would be there to support her, and she couldn't even say anything about that in front of the triplets because she couldn't make mention of the fact that she would be in attendance. Bright and early the next morning, Donovan and Maribel showed up at the Denton courthouse. For months, Donovan had been embroiled in an ongoing custody battle with his only daughter, Bella's grandfather, Clarence. The state of Texas is not a grandparents' rights state, but Clarence had made a compelling argument that a judge agreed needed to be heard. Clarence had argued that the deaths of Bella's mother, his only daughter, and his sister, Miss Bernie, were proof that something about Donovan's life or his family's lives made Bella living with Donovan dangerous. In addition, the fact that he was mentally ill and had had a baby with a mentally ill woman who had been deemed dangerous to herself and others and remanded to a mental institution for what would likely be the rest of her life was proof that he wasn't fit to be a parent. Jury was still out on whether Clarence's argument was going to win, but after months of investigations, interviews, and depositions that included Donovan, Maribel, the Queen Mother, Q, Anya, and various other family members who lived at the family complex in Denton, D-Day had finally arrived. Donovan had hired one of the best family law attorney teams in Texas, probably in the country, and they'd done and said all that they could. The decision was now in the judge's hands. After weeks of testimony and several weeks of deliberation, the judge's decision would be read in open court that morning. Hours earlier, Maribel had left the women's retreat and found her husband heavily intoxicated and playing both the piano and the guitar. After plying him with strong coffee and herbs intended to purge his body of alcohol, the two sat down and talked and prayed. When Donovan arrived at the courthouse, he'd made a decision. There was really nothing else that he could say or do that would affect the judge's decision. But there was something else that he could do that would take the fate of Bella's custody out of the judge's hands. No, he wasn't going to do what the Queen Mother had wanted to do. She wanted to just take Clarence's behind out. But because she's trying to turn over a new leaf, he'd relented to Q and Donovan's intent to let it all play out in court, at least for now. So when Donovan and Maribel made their way into the courthouse, Donovan went over to his lawyer and told him what he planned. And then he headed over to the plaintiff's table and right up to Clarence and said, "Clarence, can I holler at you for a minute?" Clarence nodded and the two men stepped out into the hallway. Donovan said, "Listen, no hard feelings. I know that you just want what's best for Bella, just like I do. How about this? I have a guest house at the family complex. It's empty. It's all yours. You can stay there as often or as little as you'd like. Whenever you decide to stay there, you have full access to Bella. You could stay as often as every other weekend or several weeks at a time, over the summer, during her school breaks, whatever works. We can go in there right now and put an end to this." Clarence said, "I bet. You must see the writing on the walls. You must know that you're about to lose. Otherwise, why would you come to me with this 11th hour deal?" Donovan said, "I'm making this offer because I know just how important it is for my daughter to be connected to all of her roots. This isn't the plea of a desperate man. I trust God." Clarence said, "I bet. I haven't been invited to that heavily fortified compound that you all call a family complex since before my sister was murdered. And now you want to extend an olive branch? When we leave here today, I'm coming to get my granddaughter. And you'll be lucky if you ever see her again." And then he walked back inside the courtroom. Donovan just shook his head. He had no idea how this was going to turn out. The only thing he knew for sure was that while he and his wife were praying, he'd heard God. God told him that grace and mercy were very much so equal virtues. While grace means that we don't get punished when we absolutely deserve it, mercy means we're still forgiven. We just have to live with the consequences. So if he extended Clarence grace, God would ensure that he received mercy. He had no idea what that was going to look like, but he was ready. Inside the courtroom, the judge called the proceedings to order. And then he said, "I've had plenty of time to review all of the information, all of the facts of this very delicate case. It's not often that I have two men in front of me fighting for custody of a child, not out of spite or vengeance, but out of love. I truly believe both of you love Bella and want what's best for her. Giving her to her grandfather's custody would not be an unprecedented act in the state of Texas. It's been done. It wouldn't be my first time doing it either. Despite grandparents' rights not being acknowledged in Texas, the safety of a child is always paramount. And I can understand how her grandfather might believe that her safety could be on the line remaining with her father. But we don't live in a state or a country where we take children from their living parents and give them to others, even grandparents, based on the decisions that other people make or solely based on their parents' mental state. We no longer sterilize individuals with mental illnesses and developmental disorders to prevent them from becoming parents, and we no longer remove their children from their care, custody, and control solely based on their diagnosis. Before I went into deliberations, I suggested that you two sit down and see if you could come up with a reasonable agreement that would serve both of you all's needs and ensure that Bella St. James could remain in both of your lives. The fact that we're here today means that you all couldn't do that. I'm really disappointed that you two would be so selfish. Was there even an attempt made? Clarence's attorney said, "No, Your Honor. The defendant didn't even reach out." Donovan's attorney said, "Your Honor, that's not true." And then he told the judge what Donovan had offered. The judge looked at Clarence and asked, "And you didn't find that to be reasonable? You didn't see that as a collaborative accommodation that would allow you to not only remain in the forefront of your granddaughter's life, but also keep you in the know, so that if at any time she was actually in danger, you could take further steps to secure her safety?" Clarence's attorney whispered something in his ear. Clarence whispered something back. And then Clarence's attorney said, "My client feels that the only way to ensure his granddaughter's safety is to give him full custody." The judge said, "Well, that makes my decision even easier. Bella St. James will remain in the custody of her father. I will not impose any visitation agreement on her father, Mr. Donovan St. James. Mr. Thomas, I guess you'll have to get in where you fit in. Maybe Mr. St. James will be gracious enough to re-extend his previous offer. This matter is dismissed." And everybody in the courtroom was shocked into silence. Donovan looked over at Maribel, and Maribel just smiled from ear to ear. If I ever took a loss, I learned a lesson. I won't ever think I'm better than the next man. I've been down before to come up, I ain't stressing. Baby, I'm too busy counting all these blessings.